I do hope you can see me today from where you are.
Ich bin ein Ehrlich.
If I'm generally anything, I guess I'm generally miserable. This modern world of science and invention is of particular interest to women.
The people, I would say, there is no patent. Would you patent the sun?
I regard myself as a soldier, though a soldier of peace.
Welcome to the Biographers.
To try to warn us, saying, "Hey, we've never had this before. This could be poisonous." But through like sort of extended exposure to whatever that is, you start to realize that the last time you tasted something, it's very different than the very first time.
It's true.
Which is kind of weird because we see taste as sort of an objective sense. When in reality, it's not exactly.
Dude, it grows. I used to hate avocados. Now I could eat an entire avocado. As a child, I hated avocados. And then when I got to be like a young adult,
you were so ready to defend yourself there because you was afraid I was going to get mad.
I mean, hey, look, my parents would give me avocado. They put them in salads and I would like push them aside because I was like, man, so they're gross. And now I'm like, give me all the avocados when they're ripe. Ugh, delicious.
Yeah. My mom doesn't like tomatoes still.
It depends on the tomato. If it's like a greenhouse tomato where it's like not very flavorful, I'm not super into it. If it's fresh from the garden, all day long.
Okay, I can take that. But if you don't like tomatoes in general, grow up. Shout out to my brother-in-law, Sharon, who doesn't like tomatoes. Grow up.
Which, by the way, I've been meaning to tell you ever since Derby. I've been going, we should hang out with Sharon more. I like that guy a lot.
Sharon is so much fun. And now that I've said that on a public podcast that lots of people listen to, no doubt there will be repercussions. I don't think I've been telling you this developing story in my house, but Shalena's oldest brother, Shaka, used just some kitschy little AI website to make a automated sort of diss song about Sharon. And they took it so personally that they bought music equipment, started making their own beats, learning how to use the music software, and they have written a full rap. They have spent actual months trying to curate into like the most perfect diss track over their eldest sibling. And I think it's awesome. Hilarious. Every time I'm playing Xbox with Caleb or just sitting and reading, working on my podcast, I am hearing them like cackling and laughing, making like Ratatouille references in a rap song. And it is so funny. I'm not sure if I'll be able to convince them to let us put a snippet of it in here. But it is, it has every reference from everything in their entire childhood, whether it's Yu-Gi-Oh or Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer. It's hilarious. So I know that if he ever hears this, I'm going to catch some heat.
I want to hear it. Well, hey, let's get this started. Let's say, hey, everybody, and welcome to the Biographers. I'm Daniel Newman, and with me is Akiva Miola.
Hello, welcome.
And we're going to get started here on Jack Daniel's Part 5. I do hope y'all have been listening to the series so far, 1 through 4. We're kind of weird to say, we're getting into some of my favorite parts. This might be my favorite episode, episode 5 here so far. There's just, I don't know, I think a lot of cool, fun little things. I know I nerd out on all this stuff that we've covered so far, and I enjoy all of it. I hope y'all have too. But again, I think this one might be my favorite episode just in terms of what we're going to be covering and what we're going to be talking about. There's just a lot of really fun stuff. So hope you all are going to be into it here.
I'm excited. I think we were talking about how it's going to get a little bit more personal, a little bit more about the subject.
And again, it's just to reiterate for anybody that's listened to the series and kind of gone, man, I feel like we still haven't really gotten to know Jack Daniel. Again, we talked about in one of the last episodes about how really at the time when Jack Daniel was first starting out, I think most people kind of saw him as a local businessman. Not any type of a legend that would be staying in the sort of American history books for 150 plus years.
Which, like we were saying, has now become shorthand for whiskey.
Exactly. You know? And so I don't think a lot of people were writing down a whole lot or saving a whole lot of records or letters from early days of Jack Daniel. But we're getting into the older years of Jack Daniel. And we do get to see a bit more insight into the man himself. So hopefully we'll be able to fulfill some of that today.
I'm stoked.
Well, let's get going here. Now, last time, we saw the empire of Jack Daniel truly start to take shape. After his longtime partner Dan Call had left the whiskey business altogether in solidarity with the growing temperance movement, Jack began to expand. After purchasing the legendary Cave Springs Hollow, Jack set up a second distillery and ramped up his production. After some competition in the marketplace called for it, Jack opened up 2 saloons in his hometown of Lynchburg to serve the community and sell his product direct to consumer, in addition to building a distribution warehouse in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. Now, where we left off last time, Jack had just begun to venture into Nashville for the purposes of expanding his brand name in the city through a guerrilla, word-of-mouth style campaign. His main focus being on a section of Nashville that catered to drinking, gambling, and prostitution, known as the Men's Quarter. Now, I'll also quickly add before we begin, at the beginning of the last episode, we were asking about what became of Jack's mentor, Uncle Nearest. Well, as it turns out, Uncle Nearest decided to retire when Jack and Dan Call parted ways as business partners and enjoyed his remaining years as a free man up until his death in 1890. I was able to confirm that. I also wanted to add another little factoid. Through some additional reading, I found that some people actually believe that the Lincoln County process of filtering whiskey through charcoal was not actually invented by the aforementioned Alfred Eaton, but rather by African slaves who were already using charcoal to filter their water.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, that kind of makes sense.
Makes a lot of sense, right? And I just kind of wanted to throw that out there because I think credit is always deserved where it should be. Now, obviously, there isn't any that I could find very specific thing that called this out. But if you kind of look at the history of whiskey making in America, and given that you could imagine a lot of slave owners probably said, I'm just going to give this project to you, so to speak, it does kind of become a 1 + 1 = 2 situation where a slave would probably be the most likely candidate to go, well, hey, charcoal thing, it purifies our water. Why not purify our whiskey?
Yeah.
It makes sense to me. Now, as you can imagine, Jack quickly made a name for himself in the men's quarter of Nashville, very much in the same way he had done as a young boy selling his whiskey out of the back of his donkey wagon. Only now he was a stylish 45-year-old. He was friendly, welcoming, loud, funny, gregarious, philanthropic, and possessed a skill that I seriously wish that I had, which is remembering almost everyone's name.
Same, dude. What sucks is I'll even repeat it to them. They'll be like, oh, what's your name? Sam? Oh, nice to meet you, Sam. Like, I just had the same issue with this class this weekend.
This was not an issue for Jack. Almost never. He was really, really good with remembering people's names. Now imagine the scene. It's a crowded, fairly noisy bar. A bunch of dudes are all just kind of hanging out, chatting when the door creaks open. You can't see who came in because the person who entered is only 5'2", but you start to see a figure move through the crowd, slapping the back of nearly every person they pass, and you hear, Johnny boy, how you doing? Hey, there he is. Robert, you old so-and-so, how the hell are you? Hey, Stanley, how's the wife? Buy you a drink? That was Jack Daniel.
I love that. We're having the same thing now with Shalena's favorite ramen bar up in Loveland, where they remember our order, and they, at this point, Shalena loves ramen so much that we go sometimes like 4 times a week, and they'll be like, okay, see you tomorrow. And it's like a little embarrassing, but also funny. Like, I love places that like have that personal touch.
Where
and he's always,
everybody knows your name.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Caleb always sings that song to me whenever we're on Xbox chat or whatever. It drives me insane. But, you know, Jack has always had that personal touch to him.
Yep.
So that makes sense.
I honestly believe that's one of the reasons that we still know him today, was that when you have that type of character and personality, your brand is probably going to expand a lot more easily.
Yeah.
And he had that kind of ability.
Hashtag branding.
Now, if he ever forgot someone's name, which was rare, he had an old trick up his sleeve and would bring over another friend he already knew and introduce them to the person whose name he forgot. When introductions were made, Jack would carry on like he had always known their name and they were old friends.
That is so smart. I'm going to start doing that now.
Have you never done this before?
No.
Yeah, so if you can't remember their name, you bring over Shalena, for example, and you just go, oh, dude, hey, this is my wife, Shalena. And that's Shalena's cue to go, oh, hi, I'm Shalena. And then the other person goes, I'm Billy. And
that is so
and you
smart.
go, yeah, hey, so Billy, I was just saying blah, 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 blah. And then you carry on like nothing ever happened. That was Jack's trick.
I'm so socially awkward. I need to write that one down.
There you go. You can use that. Now, Jack's image also helped everyone remember him, as his style was so distinct that you could hardly mistake him for anyone else.
Much like you.
And all of this, by the way, makes me more and more convinced that Jack Daniel was actually a hobbit. Now, because of Jack's persistent socializing, he had managed to rub elbows with the right people, and in March of 1896, the Nashville American newspaper sent a reporter along with a sketch artist to write an article about Jack and his endeavors in Lynchburg. By this point, Jack was now the #1 selling brand in all of Tennessee. Whiskey brand, I should say. Now, because of his distribution efforts in both Hopkinsville and Nashville, his whiskey was now being sold in every state that allowed the sale of whiskey. And even more impressive, Jack Daniel's Old No. 7 had made its way across the pond and was beginning to appear in saloons across Europe.
Really?
In 1896.
Wow.
Still, it still blows my mind to think about that.
That's such a rapid expansion too, because like, what is not even like 4 or 5 years ago that he was just local, completely local.
Exactly, and it's also amazing to think that was happening when there was already such a deep tradition of whiskey throughout Europe, especially coming from Wales and England and Scotland.
I mean, there's no doubt that all of the characters that we've talked about at some point have probably drank Jack Daniels.
Undoubtedly, I mean, going back to
Queen
Ian
Victoria,
Fleming,
but.
Even then, it is possible because Queen Victoria died in I want to say 1899, or something like that.
Or 98
so
or something
it is
like that.
possible that she had sipped some Jack Daniel by that point. You never know. I have nothing to back that up. Just saying. In Jack's incredibly ornate and lavish house, even something as unsuspecting as the fireplace mantle told the story of his increasing global popularity. Supposedly, when the marble fireplace mantle was on its way to Jack from Italy, the ship carrying it was attacked by pirates in the Caribbean and sunk. But when the pirates discovered that the mantle was being sent to none other than the legendary Jack Daniel, they pulled it up off the seafloor and delivered it to port themselves.
That's so funny. They're like, nah, man, we got too much respect for him.
They literally were like, wait. This is going to the Jack Daniel? Like Jack Daniel. Oh shoot, we gotta get this guy. We can't, come on, that sucks.
Yeah.
And they pulled it back up.
That's so funny.
Supposedly. Now, because of the increasing popularity of his brand pretty much globally, Jack had also recently started to construct a new distilling facility with all of the latest and greatest technological advancements in brewing and distilling. The facility was to be 3 stories high, complete with warehouse space enough to hold 6,000 barrels of spirit. By 1896, Jack had already obtained the record for longest continuously operating distillery in the United States, which is a record the company still holds to this day.
Wow, that's incredible.
It still amazes me. Now, maybe most importantly, though, Jack had firmly rooted himself as a beloved legend in the town of Lynchburg. He hosted massive parties regularly and doted on all his guests like they were his own family.
I'm imagining like a Southern Great Gatsby type character.
100%. But more of the people.
Yes.
Not I'm going to make a grand entrance. He was there from the beginning. Hey, guys, come on in. Now we have some chicken. Have some.
Yeah, exactly.
Just being a mensch, like I said. After establishing a tradition of hosting incredible church dinners on Sundays, Jack was known to ride up to the church close to the end of the preacher's sermon and shout, "Hey, Elder Webster, your congregation has all gone to sleep. Turn them loose and come with me for dinner." And they did. When he would say that, the preacher would be like, "All right, guys, that's enough, right?" And then they would shut down and follow Jack to his house and go and have dinner.
Funny. Well, that's 100% the way to keep your neighbors happy with you too.
True. Now, Jack wasn't much for church himself, but greatly understood its importance to the community and was known, secretly, to be a generous benefactor to every single church in Moore County. He even donated money to every surrounding school. The reporter from the Nashville American walked away not only with a great respect for Jack, but all of the surrounding Lynchburg area, which he described as, quote, "one of the most prosperous and promising towns in Tennessee."
Wow.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
Another big boost for Jack, as the article helped spur on even more growth for his business and reputation. So now we're closing in on the turn of the century, 1900, which makes Jack about 50 years old. Regardless of his growing years, Jack seemed to remain youthful, maintaining his reputation as a ladies' man and fashionista. Now, there is one thing about Jack Daniel that I would probably consider slightly gross, but it's also important to remember context for the times. Now, like I said a second ago, Jack was a ladies' man, and in particular, he was a fan of the young ladies.
Oh, here we go.
No, Jack was not a pedophile, at least not from anywhere that I have read or seen.
But he was an old pervert.
But he kind of was an old pervert. And he did have a pretty big crush on a young woman named Fanny Blythe, whom Jack met when she was 13.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Oh, God. Oh, God.
Now, hang on. He initially hired her to come play piano for parties he was throwing. Now, over a couple of years, and as she grew older, Jack developed more and more of a crush.
Come play piano for me, little lady.
God.
I like the way you hit them keys.
Again, not trying to condone a nearly 50-year-old man going after a now 15-year-old girl, but again, context of the time
I mean, to be fair,
important.
At 16, you were considered a grown person and you would run property and own houses. And like also, whose grandma was not married to a guy who's like 15 years older than them?
It happened a lot.
It happened so much.
It happened a lot.
And you know what? To be fair, there was some benefits. Gosh, I don't even know why I'm saying this, but like, you know, the guy would croak in a couple of years and the lady would be, you know, as free as a woman could be in a
set financially.
very man-centered society.
Yes.
So, you know, but like,
So again, for some context, first of all, the age of consent laws at the time only protected acts of rape. In 1880, most states voted into law that the age of consensual intercourse was somewhere between 7 and 10 years old.
Oh my God.
I know, dude. It's freaking gross, but this was laws, okay? This wasn't just opinions, okay? This was laws that were put into place at the time.
We are talking about Lynchburg. So.
This is not just Lynchburg. This was a lot of different states.
Okay.
This was state laws that were being created all around the country. This was pretty general. That's why I say 7 to 10, is that some states were as low as 7, some were as old as 10. So again, gross. I know. I'm not trying to condone any of this, okay? It's nasty. But an important factor to remember was life expectancy. And we did talk about this in one of the last episodes.
You're right.
But though life expectancy was steadily increasing, in 1900, the life expectancy in the US was just 48 years old. So I think people generally had a different attitude as to the appropriate time that quote-unquote life started. Now,
yeah.
All that being said, yes, Jack had an eye for girls that were usually between the age of 15 and about 25. However, he did seem to be at least a slight gentleman about everything and was known to always ask parents' permission before asking a young lady to court. By this time, though, Jack really had his heart set on Fanny Blythe, who was turning 16. So smitten was he that Jack even asked Fanny's father for her hand in marriage. But even her father thought it was a bit too much and said to Jack, quote, "I think you're a little too old for such a young girl."
Well, good on the dad for standing up there.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. Even this is a little bit of a stretch for the parlance of our times kind of a thing. Now, though he was sad, Jack didn't hold grudges and even attended Fanny's wedding 6 years later, giving her $10 gold coin as a wedding gift.
That's nice. Okay.
It's nice, right?
Yeah, at least he respected the boundary there.
He respected the boundaries and didn't do anything. So it's like, you know, again, and he would always, he was upfront about everything.
And I mean, once again, we're going to talk about a moral barometer here. We have this guy who did respect the boundaries of the family, and then the other whiskey competition was, in charge of the KKK.
Yeah.
So,
you know. Or named after the guy that was the first Grand Wizard of the KKK. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
So named after, but not run by.
Right. We're talking about, and again, in the grand scheme of Jack Daniel's life, this is to me one of those things where I go like, okay, to be fair, the times and the laws of the times, everybody kind of was like, yeah, this is pretty normal.
That makes him more like Great Gatsby because, you know, Leonardo DiCaprio's preferencing ladies the last couple of years too.
Touche. Well done. Now, Jack would remain a bachelor for his entire life, but if any of the boys in town asked him if the bachelor life was the way to go, he would respond by saying, quote, "Damn to hell, you can't compete with other boys in town." meaning this isn't a competition. Find someone you love. It's kind of cute.
That is kind of cute.
You know. For Jack, however, the life he had settled into was working out just fine for him. His sister Betty and her husband James Connor were still living in the house, and from what I understand, Betty acted the part of mom for everyone in the house, including Jack. This seemed to suit him just fine, as he was on the road often for business and enjoyed the stability when he got home. He figured if he did ever marry, it would mess up the dynamics of his living situation, which he didn't want to do. He maintained a handful of quote-unquote serious relationships, at least according to his lovers after his death, but his heart was still most committed to whiskey. So rather than ramping up his search for a soulmate, Jack started to ramp up his whiskey business even more. Now, in episode 3, I mentioned the Bottle in Bond Act that was established in 1897, which encouraged distillers to age their products for longer by not taxing on the whiskey until it was finished maturing in the barrel. But bottling whiskey hadn't yet truly caught on, as it was still a fully manual process. Machinery for mass production had yet to be developed. Only a select few were putting their whiskey into bottles, and even they were marking it as a premium product that ensured the untempered quality within. Fun little sidebar. One early bottler of whiskey was a company called E.G. Booze, who made bottles in the shape of log cabins and bared the label of, quote, E.G. Booze's Old Cabin Whiskey. Another example of someone who ripped off Jack's branding style, but interestingly, that company, E.G. Booze, is indeed where we get the generalized slang term of booze for alcohol.
I've never once even thought about that.
It was literally one of the first companies in America to bottle their whiskey, and it was E.G. Booze.
A bottle
so they were
of
like,
booze.
anybody got any booze? That was where it came from.
Wow.
Pretty amazing. But regarding the guaranteed quality of bottled whiskey, turns out it wasn't so guaranteed to start. Saloon owners and bartenders all over the place were known to open the bottles beforehand and cut them with some poorer quality spirit so as to stretch out their profits. That all changed with the Bottle and Bond Act, as the government could now completely shut you down if they caught you cutting liquor, as it was now a form of consumer fraud. Big deal.
Yeah, definitely.
But in 1903, the process of making glass bottles on an industrial scale was perfected by a man named Michael Joseph Owens, who had previously worked for Thomas Edison to create a system for mass producing light bulbs.
That kind of makes sense. Yeah, it's sort of in the same vein.
I actually have goosebumps right now because it's so I love learning this stuff because it's so, of course, that's how it happened.
Yeah.
Right? Where you just go, oh, of course. Why would they need to manufacture glass bottles on a big scale? Well, it started with needing to do light bulbs first.
Yeah, it's kind of like how the Super Soaker, toy gun was invented by a NASA scientist who had to find a way to pressurize a little bit of water.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So whenever they were doing cooling systems and stuff like that, it was this black scientist who worked for NASA, and he made all these micro cooling systems, from what I understand.
Wow.
And he was like, "This is actually really fun. When I pump this up, it just shoots water, and it's like, what if we made this look like a little space gun?" And that's how the Super
awesome.
Soaker was invented.
That makes perfect sense.
It makes sense.
That's so cool. Now, this guy, Michael Joseph Owens, his new 10-arm automatic bottle machine was capable of producing 240 glass bottles per minute.
Wow.
That's 4 bottles per second and could be fitted with any glass bottle mold that a person could dream up. Once glass bottles were able to be manufactured on this scale, the game of advertising in the whiskey business went from 0 to 100, as the glass bottles offered a whole new way to let consumers know what your brand was all about. Most whiskey makers at the time took the opportunity to sex up their products, like Mountain Dew.
Wait, what?
Mountain Dew made whiskey first.
That also makes sense. This is so irritating. That makes total sense because it's a total if you look at the old Mountain Dew bottles, it's always some hillbilly barefoot drinking Mountain Dew, and it's of course they probably during Prohibition or something switched to soda.
I honestly, now I want to look into it more. I don't know why Mountain Dew changed, but yes, they were initially a whiskey company, a bourbon company.
That makes so much more sense.
And they, again, would sex up their products when the bottling kind of manufacturing process was perfected. And their bottles featured the picture of a woman fishing, who accidentally catches her dress during her back cast, which leads to her lifting her dress up by accident and exposing her backside.
Oh no.
I know. But that was on their bottle. So people were like, ooh, and then like that would be their advertising scheme.
I won't lie. I'm pretty sure 90% of my decisions at a liquor store, if it wasn't from a recommendation by a friend or how to drink, it was just because the bottle looked cool.
Yes.
Oh, this one's got a skull on it.
It's true. It's pretty true.
I like the bottom of it. It looks like a rose.
But this just wasn't Jack's style. Of the limited glass bottles he had produced in the past, many, or I should say most, had simple slogans that reflected the traditional honest product he made, emphasizing quality. However, now that everyone was getting in on the glass bottle game, Jack knew he had to find a way to stand out from the competition. He was soon approached by a salesman from the Illinois Alton Glass Company, another new player in the glass bottle manufacturing scene, who had recently designed a square glass bottle that featured an elegant fluted neck. Jack's nephew, Lem, thought it was a stupid idea, but Jack saw the bottle, the square bottle specifically, not only as a way to stand out from the competition, but a subtle way of reminding his customers that he was a square dealer.
Yeah. And also, I'm thinking from Jack's business perspective, it's a square bottle. It's going to fit into crates better. You're going to have more volume of liquor that you could fit per container.
You would think that is actually not true.
Really?
The round, because if you think about it, all of the people that were making bottles at the time were making round bottles. So they had customized the shipping process to fit around to these round glass bottles, not the square ones. So that was actually one of Lem's points to Jack, because he was like, this is going to be worse to ship. It's going to be harder to ship. And Jack was like, trust me, we'll figure it out. It'll be better. That kind of thing.
But that also kind of stands out because it's like, it's simple, but dignified, you know, as opposed to, like we were talking about, the one that's shaped like a log cabin.
Exactly.
You know, we have a clean square. It almost looks like a table leg, you know?
Absolutely. Now, when Lem fought Jack on the idea, Jack responded by saying, quote, well, Lemmy, being as how my whiskey is different from everybody else's whiskey and is the best there is, we'll have square bottles, and the bottles will be different too.
She was basically like, oh, Lemmy, shut up.
Kinda. There's more he's like, hey, look, if we're going to be different in all these other ways, we're going to be different in this way too. That's just how we're going to do it, kind of a thing.
Yeah, I like that.
Now, Lem turned out to be dead wrong in his assumption that square bottles were a bad idea. The bottles grabbed the eyes of consumers immediately, and many became dedicated fans because, unlike all other bottled whiskey being sold, Jack's bottles didn't roll around when placed in the back of a cart, which meant far less chance of shattering on the journey home.
That's smart. It's kind of like here in Colorado, we have tin cup whiskey, and it's an octagonal thing, and their whole thing is that you're supposed to bring when you're camping. It has the tin cup on the top so you can, pour out shots. It's a little novelty, but the idea of the facets is so that it doesn't roll over.
I have some tin cup in here, actually. We could have that if we wanted to.
Yeah, we should.
As of 2024, 120 years after the Jack Daniel's square bottle hit the shelves, Jack Daniel's Old No. 7, along with many other types of Jack Daniel's spirits, are still sold in square bottles. So, we are now arriving in 1904, and history buffs will know this to be the year of the Louisiana Purchase Exposition, often referred to as the St. Louis World's Fair, which took place between April and December of that year. If we need an age check on Uncle Jack, this would place him at just about 55. Soon, Jack caught wind that the World's Fair would host a whiskey tasting competition, and bronze, silver, gold, and a grand prize medal would be awarded for the best whiskeys in the world.
Yeah, he cannot refuse a challenge at this point.
Jack initially played coy, telling all that encouraged him to enter that he had little interest in accolades or attaboys, but secretly, Jack applied as a contestant and was making plans to visit the World's Fair himself. Now, sadly, just before Jack's departure, his old mentor, Dan Call, passed away at 68 years old. Though Jack was devastated by the news, his resolve now doubled, determined to honor the legacy that Dan Call and Uncle Nearest had bestowed upon him. After a luxurious train ride to St. Louis, Jack arrived at the George Washington Hotel with 2 cases of his Old No. 7. Jack's flamboyant garb and easy demeanor quickly earned him the nickname of the little guy from Tennessee to prominent fairgoers, which I love. The day after Jack's arrival in St. Louis was going to be the day of the whiskey competition, at 1 p.m. to be precise. Prior to the competition, Jack decided to settle his nerves by taking a stroll through the fairgrounds. It boasted over 80 food vendors and 43 full-service restaurants, which introduced to America such foods as peanut butter, hot dogs, cotton candy, iced tea, the waffle ice cream cone.
I was just about to say that. If you didn't say that.
Hamburgers, and Dr. Pepper soda pop.
Okay, so just like American stuff.
American food was introduced to America in 1904.
I guess.
Peanut butter, hot dogs, and hamburgers. We're done. That's it. We're in America, dude. This is it.
We were talking about cultural canon. They just invented the cultural canon that year, you know? Yeah.
I will say though, I'm just thinking of this. When I was watching years ago, the Ken Burns baseball documentary series, which is absolutely incredible for any sports fans out there, highly recommend it. There's a point where they claim that hot dogs were invented at baseball games because a German immigrant who was selling sausages found if he put them into a roll, people wouldn't need to cut their sausage up with a knife and fork. So
that is kind of smart.
I kind of want to look into the history of that a little bit more, but according to what the research that I looked at, hot dogs were apparently made popular at the 1904 World's Fair.
And the story for the waffle cone, by the way, is apparently at the World's Fair, there was an ice cream vendor who ran out of cups, and he was right next to a European style,
like a Belgian waffle maker
Belgian
kind of thing?
waffle maker, and he asked for them to roll it into a cone in order to produce it. Whether or not that was already pre-planned or a thing of happenstance, seems like every food story is like, well, we didn't have this, so we made this.
Hey, print the legend. You know what I'm saying?
You know, exactly. So maybe that's true, maybe that's not, but that's what happened at the World's Fair.
When the legend is better than the story, print the legend. Now, there were massive exhibition halls that showcased the latest and greatest in machinery and electricity, like Thomas Edison's fancy new electric broiler that he claimed could cook a steak in just 6 minutes. Other innovations at the 1904 fair included the world's first wireless telephone, an early version of the fax machine, the X-ray machine, and the infant incubator. So like for children that needed to be incubated, basically, like to help them grow.
Yeah.
That was introduced in 1904.
Wow. That's
pretty
interesting.
amazing.
And X-ray is actually, I want to say, a Colorado home invention from Nikola Tesla.
Huh, I did not know that either.
I could be wrong. This could be an Akiva fact, but we'll see.
We'll have to fact check that one. There was even an entire exhibition hall that featured 140 different automobiles, and it would be just 4 years after this event that Henry Ford began mass producing his Model T. There was even the world's first airship contest, which invited various inventors to showcase their latest advancements in flying machines. After wandering around the fair for a few hours, and I hope eating a couple of hot dogs, the hour of judgment was approaching. So Jack made his way to the agricultural building where the whiskey tasting competition was to take place. The whole affair turned out to be much more formal than Jack had anticipated. All of the entrance whiskeys were precisely lined up along 4 tables, guarded by a chain link fence to keep the competitors from tampering with any of the bottles. The system for judging was made up of 30 separate scoring categories, and after a jury of 20 tasters gave their scores, the top marks would be certified and then passed on to a smaller, superior jury of 9 tasters to make the final decision.
Oh my gosh.
Super serious, right? Scoring 95 to 100 points meant you were the grand prize winner. 85 to 94 points went to gold, 75 to 84 to silver, and 60 to 74 to bronze. The tasting session took over 4 hours, which didn't exactly help in aiding Jack's anxiety with the whole thing. But after hours of nail-biting anticipation, the chairman of the event, Henry Hochter, finally addressed the crowd. Bronze medals were awarded. No dice for Jack. Silver medals were awarded. Snubbed again. But when it came time to hand out gold medals, Mr. Hochter said, quote, "Gentlemen, the gold medal for the world's finest whiskey goes to Jack Daniel Distillery.
Yay!
Lynchburg, not Virginia, but Lynchburg, Tennessee."
Ah, okay.
So he was like very specific because I guess there's a Lynchburg in Virginia as well. Wonder how they got their name.
Interesting.
Now, the whole crowd started mumbling to one another with sentiments of, who the hell is Jack Daniel? And, oh, you mean the little guy from Tennessee with the mustache? Jack was beaten out by only one distillery, the Sunnybrook Distillery in Kentucky, which to my knowledge, you can still get Sunnybrook whiskey.
Oh.
But remember, this was an international competition, so distillers had brought their whiskey from as far as Scotland, and Americans had beaten them all out.
That's cool. That's
Crazy
really cool.
Needless to say, Jack was pretty stoked. Also, quick side note, something I mentioned in a previous episode but didn't quite connect the dots on for everyone. When bourbon started to make its way to America back in the late 1700s, it was indeed the Americans who figured out that charring the inside of barrels added flavor to their whiskey and drew out impurities. Over the next 100 years, that wisdom found its way back to Scotland and Ireland, which is why we have barrel-aged Scotch and whiskey today.
Gotcha.
But prior to the Americans inventing the barrel-aged method, all Scotch and Irish whiskey was clear, like vodka. Just
Makes
wanted
sense.
to let everybody know that. I think that's kind of cool. Now, despite the personal triumph, however, Jack didn't exactly receive a hero's welcome when he returned home, as the movement of temperance had gained more ground than ever before. A huge contributing factor to this new massive rise in the temperance movement came from an old woman named Carrie Nation. Now, Carrie Nation was a radical and outspoken temperance leader who, in 1900, around the age of 55, claims to have received a vision from God, which commanded her to, quote, destroy saloons wherever they exist.
So all Jack Daniel needs to do is say that he had a vision from God.
I'm more just
Saying
laughing
to
that
drink
this
more
woman
Jack
had
Daniels.
supposedly a vision from God that God said, you need to go destroy things.
True. Well, I mean, that's kind of Old Testament, right?
That is fair. There was a lot of destruction back then. Now, it's probably important to note that Carrie's mother, Mary Moore, suffered from some form of psychosis, believed herself to be the actual Queen Victoria, and was eventually committed to an insane asylum.
That's so funny.
Did her daughter, Carrie, possibly inherit some of her psychosis? You'll have to decide for yourself. Now, I'll also say that Carrie's second husband, being a deplorable alcoholic, might have had something to do with her receiving a call from God to destroy saloons and alcohol consumption in general. Just want to throw that out there. Her husband's alcoholic nature might have also contributed to one of her favorite sayings, which was, quote, men are nicotine-soaked, beer-besmirched, whiskey-greased, red-eyed devils.
She sounds like fun to be around.
I know. She actually, like, this whole, I'm going to talk about it for another couple of minutes because it just, I couldn't help it. It was just too much fun.
I mean, I'm sure her husband was probably a pain in the ass, but
Yes.
like, you know, God, really? Are we going there?
Yes. Now, yes, her husband would divorce her a few years into her crusade. So just want to throw that out there. But Carrie Nation described herself as, quote, a bulldog running along at the feet of Jesus, barking at what he doesn't like.
A bulldog, too.
Now, if I was to describe her physically, I'd say, imagine if like a chubby little pug dog grew up into a human female, then threw on some Ben Franklin style glasses, and then dressed like a Christmas caroler on their way to a funeral. You got the image?
I was trying to like think of something witty, but that really got me. Yeah, I'm picturing that.
And I'll show you a picture of her afterwards. It's startlingly accurate.
If we remember, we have to put a picture on the Instagram so people can see
Yeah,
it.
we should. Now, her campaign began in rural Kansas, and after receiving her vision in 1900, she started using a sledgehammer to smash up any drugstores that dared to carry the devil's brew. Now, after cleaning up her hometown of all liquor, she did the same in Kiowa, Oklahoma, and then moved on to Wichita, Kansas.
How was she not arrested for destruction of property?
Oh, we'll get there. Now, in Wichita, probably because the sledgehammer was too heavy for the chonky lady, she started carrying her signature hatchet, which became her new smashing tool. She'd smash bottles of liquor, mirrors behind the bar, posters with sexy ladies advertising booze, really anything you'd imagine a prudish 19th century bulldog of a woman would hate, all while singing various religious hymns. So she'd be like, I love my Jesus. Just destroy.
I'd be like, get the fuck out of here, lady. I'd just be so mad. Like, imagine being that poor pharmacist, you know, you're just like working the counter and then you see like, oh God, she's coming by.
Here she's coming.
Oh, no. And then, you know, and there goes your front window.
Now, when it came time to move on from Wichita to Topeka, Kansas, she was oddly kind enough to warn all the liquor merchants in the city with an open letter that read, quote, I came to rescue you, as well as all those you are murdering. Do not delay, for he that being reproved hardeneth his neck shall suddenly be destroyed, and that without remedy. We invite you to join us in the destruction of the machinery hell has set up here on earth to literally devour humanity.
Okay.
Intense, right?
Very intense.
Now, as you can imagine, you were either completely for her or completely against her, and those that were completely against her definitely let her know. Pretty much everywhere she went, her opposition would throw eggs at her, often rotten ones, dump liquor on her head, or just straight up beat her. Now, while violence isn't the answer, don't fret too much because she was apparently like 6 feet tall, weighing something like 250 pounds, and it was said that it would require 4 police officers to restrain her. So she was huge.
Well, and this is also the thing with religious zealots too, is once you have this mindset where, you know, X group is now the enemy, when they behave poorly to you, that is more assurance that what you're doing is right, not them responding to you being actively rude. Because how could you be rude? What you're doing is trying to save them from hell.
Yep.
You know, so why are these people throwing liquor at me? Oh, probably because they're evil, not because I smashed their windows. This is the devil
against me kind of a thing.
You know?
Yep. Absolutely. Now, to answer your question from earlier, in the event that she was jailed and needed bailing out, her supporters would sell little souvenir hatchets to raise her bail money. So they'd be like, who wants a Carrie Nation hatchet? And they would like sell these things for money.
That is actually kind of cute and I want one.
I know, it's adorable. I almost want to like pause for a second just that I can Google, look at it right now. Just Google, just like it sounds, Carry Nation, Carrie Nation.
Carry Nation. That is a Benjamin Franklin cosplayer
in a
dressed
Christmas
up
caroler
as Queen Victoria
going to a funeral, right?
Going to a funeral.
That's exactly what she looked. And did you see the picture of her with the hatchet?
Yes, I'm looking at it right now.
She's a character, man. She's a wild looking character.
She's a handsome woman. That you know,
that's a kind way to say it.
Yeah, but honestly, like I'm not rooting for her, but I'm kind of rooting for her because it's like so fun.
She's funny, I will say. Now, before long, saloons across the United States began to hang signs with a popular slogan that read, quote, all nations welcome, except Carrie. I think it's brilliant. Now, her family eventually became so ashamed of her actions that they would later call her, quote, a blot on the family Bible.
Yikes.
Yeah. Distillers would also use her image for a bit of tongue-in-cheek advertising by renaming themselves the Carrie Nation Saloon and creating all kinds of bottles and flasks shaped like her. Think of the old kind of racist Aunt Jemima bottles. They would make whiskey bottles of Carrie Nation.
I love that. That sounds like such a fun little souvenir. I'd like the little hatchet, and I would totally be collecting this.
Her holding it to her chest?
Because like I'm picturing this in the same way that millennials feel about Shrek, where it's kind of an ironic thing.
Yes.
You know, like, oh, you want to go to the Carrie Nation bar? We're going to go out and...
It's pretty accurate. But regardless of how you personally felt about her, you couldn't ignore her, as her now thousands of followers were becoming so influential that the gears were starting to turn for a total liquor ban on the federal level. Suffice it to say, Carrie Amelia Nation did indeed help to carry a nation closer and closer to full-blown prohibition.
Boo.
Her name is Carrie A. Nation. How could I not throw that in there?
I know. I was thinking it too, to be fair.
Right? Like, as soon as you hear it, you're like, Carrie A. Nation? Really? That's her name? It is. Now, this is what Jack and all his fellow distillery owners were now up against. Since the mid-1890s, police raids were becoming more frequent on establishments that purveyed gambling and prostitution, and state legislations were tightening. Of course, corruption followed as distillers scrambled to bribe state officials to stave off new laws, but rumors of corruption were starting to spread, and voters really didn't appreciate that. Counties in Tennessee rallied, individually voted to ban saloons within county limits, and by 1903, 55 of the 96 counties voted to ban saloons.
Yeah, which, okay, kind of left field here, but Boardwalk Empire, have you watched that?
The first 2 seasons.
Super good. Kind of reminding me of this sort of era. I think we're in that era in that show.
That's the 20s.
Was it the 20s?
Yeah, that's
okay.
when
1920
was when Prohibition was officially introduced into America.
You're right. Okay.
Yeah.
We can cut that out.
No, you're fine. Now, Jack's nephew, Lem Motlow, wanted to take more aggressive measures in fighting the temperance movement, but Jack refused. Over the years, Lem had developed quite the hot head, which led to some pretty nasty arguments between the two. I think Lem was in a bad place mentally, as his wife Clara had died a few years prior at just 30 years old, leaving Lem to raise their son, John Rieger Motlow, alone. He did remarry a few years later and had 4 more children, but the scar of her death seemed to cut deep. I mean, I get that.
Yeah.
Now, one afternoon in 1905, Jack and his trusted nephew Lem got into their worst fight yet. For some time, Jack had been employing a Nashville native named Walter Dreeman to help with managing the distillery. One day, when Jack wasn't around, Lem asked Walter to start sampling barrels, pick out a handful of the best barrels, and then send them to Lem's personal saloons. Not long after Walter started tasting did Uncle Jack show up. Up to this point in time, I'm not sure that Jack had ever been so angry. Think like Yosemite Sam from Looney Tunes right now with the mushroom plumes of smoke coming out of his ears.
I'm kind of picturing that because he seems kind of cool and collected most of the time.
He was furious when he saw that they were taking individual samples without him. Like he was like, no, this is what I do, kind of a thing. His anger was initially directed at Walter, but quickly turned to Lem when he found out that it was at his request. Jack said Lem was screwing everything up because every one of his barrels was as good as the next, and that by selecting specific ones, he was also messing up the serial number organization he had in place. Lem spat right back that Jack didn't know what he was talking about. After a few more minutes of screaming, Lem started making threats to leave and start his own brandy distillery. Jack was seeing too much red, so he basically told Lem F you and walked into town to calm down. But when Jack came back a few hours later, he found that not only had Lem announced to all the distillery staff that he was quitting, but that Lem had pulled the Jerry Maguire move by asking all the employees, "Who's coming with me?"
Oh, no. It sucks, too, because, I mean, Lem was under Jack's wing this entire time. Jack has been nothing but sort of a father figure, and he's getting hot-headed, and he kind of has these sort of...
I know better than you.
Exactly. Nasty ideologies. And
now, much to Jack's consternation, Lem had taken one of his best distillers, a man named R.A. Hinkle. Jack shouted, "Damn to hell!" and informed his employees that they were a whiskey business, plain and simple, and if they didn't like it, they could leave too. But none did. Once Jack cooled off a bit, he rode up to Lem's farm to apologize and see if he could smooth things over. But Lem and his now partner, Mr. Hinkle, had made up their mind and went ahead with their plans to open a brandy distillery. All of these changes, the growing sentiment towards temperance, the shuttering of saloons, and the departure of his nephew Lem, were really starting to make Jack consider retirement. He was getting older, more tired, and much more prone to quietly sitting on his front porch, watching his distillery chug away from a distance. But Lem wasn't quite done giving his old Uncle Jack a headache, as in October of 1906, after Lem had sold some lame mules to a local farmer, the farmer took Lem to court. Subsequently, Jack was subpoenaed to testify on his nephew's behalf, subpoenaed because Jack had initially refused. Not because he hated Lem, but because he hated the government and was, from the earliest of his memories, always trying to stay under the radar of Uncle Sam.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of his whole approach too with the prohibition thing too. Because like, I'm sure his perspective when it came to him and Lem was just like, hey, if we don't make a fuss, we can probably sell for as long as humanly possible and ride this wave until it crashes.
He was it's the same thing. Like all the other brands were going, let's put sexy ladies on our bottles. And he was like, whoa, 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 whoa. All that's going to do is ruffle feathers. Like if we can just keep under the radar and keep under the wrath of all these people, like let's just chill. Yeah. Let's just sell our good product. People will know that it's good. Like that was his whole kind of MO.
Yeah, because I mean, with all movements like that, you're going to have the radical, I hate people who hate liquor and the people who say, I hate people who drink liquor. But, the people in the middle are probably going to go for something a little bit more dignified, a little bit more subtle, like Jack Daniels.
It's true. Absolutely true. Now, normally, I probably wouldn't go into this story a ton, but because Jack had to appear in court, we have official court records and quotes which give us some of the only fully recorded, unfiltered dialogue of Jack Daniel. It's kind of awesome because through his speaking, you can see and hear just how close he was trying to keep his cards to his vest. Rather than me rereading it all out, I prepared a little script for Akiva and I to go through. Now, do note, this isn't the full unaltered transcript. I'm taking some creative liberties with the lawyer questioning Jack, but all of the quotes that I am going to read in the voice of Jack are actual quotes from Jack Daniel in the courtroom.
Yeah, it'd be just cool to hear a speech pattern,
Exactly. So, without further ado, let's take it away. Akiva, you're starting us out.
All right. So, Mr. Daniel, please state for the record where you live in proximity to the town of Lynchburg and your occupation.
2 miles from town is where I live at. Hayseed, mostly farming.
Hayseed farming, Mr. Daniel. Do you not have a team of mules that haul goods from your property every day? What do those mules haul, Mr. Daniel?
Well, liquors and grain, barrel timber, and wood and coal.
Let me be more direct. Please state whether or not you have engaged in the business of distilling, and if so, for how long?
Yes, I have been engaged in the distillery business and rat smart grain business for 30-odd years or more.
Very well. Now, in that time of hauling your goods with your teams of mules, have you ever had mules show signs of overwork by walking on their toes? And if so, how many mules?
Well, I have had a good many mules to walk on their toes. I never kept count of the number.
I see. And in your many years' experience with mules, if they were overworked, would the heel of the mule's hoof start to grow faster than the toe?
Well, the wearing off of the toe, more or less, and not using the heel would cause it to grow faster.
Indeed. Now, the mules that were sold to my client from Mr. Motlow, did you ever see these mules?
Yes, sir. I remember of seeing them once. I saw them more than once, I reckon, but one time in particular, they were in very nice fix then. Right, pretty pair of mules.
Now, Mr. Daniel, I understand you haul most of your goods to Tullahoma, is that correct?
I haul a portion of it there, the most of it, a great deal.
And in your experience with taking your own mules to Tullahoma from Lynchburg, how long might it take for a mule to get overworked?
At least 3 years, sometimes 10 or 12, but they generally go 2 or 3 years before they commence walking on their toes, and never unless they are strained. I think it is bad driving and overloading that causes them to go walking on their toes.
And I suppose you all overload and overwork all of your mules, do you?
Well, yes, a great deal. Most of them we do.
Thank you, Mr. Daniel. That will be all.
Now, as you can see from that amazing performance that we just gave, the prosecuting lawyer had to really dig in their heels and pull teeth just to get questions answered. Jack remained all of his life adverse to any kind of lawman.
I love this because it's just like the most basic questions. He's like, where do you live? He's like, I live somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, could you tell us where that is? And he's like, could tell you.
It's like, what do you do on your farm? Grain? Hayseed?
It's like, aren't you the guy who won the World's Fair for liquor last year?
Literally, he's like pulling teeth just to get the stuff answered.
I might have done that. Because just a complete distrust. He's like, please get me out of here. I don't want to talk about myself.
Yeah, exactly. Now, sadly, we don't actually know what happened with this case, as the courtroom later burned down and much of the records were lost. That's some of the few records that we have because that building burned down.
Did he get like lynched or something?
The building? I don't think you can lynch a building.
I don't know. They lynch a lot of things there. That's kind of where the name comes from.
Now, all of this stress from all these different areas were really starting to take a toll on Jack, probably not aided by his loneliness. He started to drink more heavily and indulge in overeating. I'm sure many of you, like me, can understand how this goes. Jack was starting to get kind of fat and his health started to decline.
Well, okay, till 55, that's not so bad.
It's not so bad. Now, more so than ever before, Jack began to see his stress and anger levels rise, and he would soon find that his inability to control his anger and frustration would end up leading to his ultimate doom. And that's where we'll pick back up for part 6, the conclusion of Jack Daniel.
I'm so stoked. This episode is by far my favorite one so far.
It's pretty great, right?
Episode 3 was pretty good. This one is definitely my favorite because we got to actually hear what he sounded like.
He sounded like the whole thing with the World's Fair, really.
Oh my gosh.
Like, I love learning about all this stuff, like these turn of the century inventions that we quite honestly take for granted, right? Like the fact that we can incubate children who are prematurely born who need extra help, that prior to about 120 years ago did not exist at all. So this was like one of the earliest examples of like of what would you call it, postnatal care, prenatal care? Anyways, I don't know those medical terms. I'm not good at that kind of stuff. Even down to things like hot dogs, hamburgers, waffle cones, Dr. Pepper. Like,
I mean, he's 2 degrees removed from Thomas Edison, which I think is really interesting. Also, he went to go see Alexander Graham Bell's, one of his first inventions.
The wireless telephone, by the way, it used a radio transmission. Mm-hmm. So it basically sent it into a radio broadcast, and the radio would shoot it over something. So it was technically wireless because of that. That's pretty darn interesting.
That's super interesting. There are probably going to be a couple people who ended up at this World's Fair who might end up getting a biography in the future.
I would almost definitely say so. That's kind of the neat thing about those types of events. You had mentioned earlier in one of the other episodes that World's Fairs are still happening. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, I'm planning on going to Japan in a year, and my wife and I are trying to get tickets for the World's Fair in Osaka.
That is so cool. And so as much as that is neat for me to hear now, if we rewound the clock to 1904, right? This wasn't just a like, oh, you're going to the World's Fair. This was like,
you're going to the World's Fair. It's like going to the Olympics.
I would even Olympics, or if Disney World was only opened
once a year
for a couple months or whatever, and then you got to go. It would be such a thing. And I would even say bigger than Disney World because it's the latest and greatest innovations, not only in technology, but in things like food.
Yeah.
You're like, I'm going to taste something that I never knew existed prior to this.
Yeah.
Could you imagine living life not knowing what a hot dog was like and then going somewhere and then having a hot dog? I would just be like, game over, man. Now all I want is hot dogs.
Yeah. Dude, give me that weird random meat obelisk.
That's like penis looking thing in a bun. I want it.
I want that.
It's delicious.
Yeah.
Or hamburgers really is that's the closest to my heart. I'm like, dude, I could eat a burger every single day.
I was a hot dog kid, but I've become a hamburger man. You know?
So it's weird. I'm a hamburger person, but like as years have gone on, if I'm like at a ball game or something and I grab a hot dog, I go, man, why don't I eat? I know why I don't eat more hot dogs. They're not good for you. But every time I have them, I'm like, God, I love hot dogs. They're so good.
My one caveat with hot dogs is the price, because here's the issue. Sometimes the hot dog is made at a place that makes hot dogs, and then the price is right because they boil them or they roll them or whatever. But if the hot dog is made at a hamburger place, it takes just as long to cook a hot dog as it does a hamburger. So if you go to like Five Guys or something and you get a hot dog from there, it's going to take forever. So they charge the same price, and it is not nearly as sufficient a meal as a hamburger.
I completely agree with that. It usually takes me a couple hot dogs to feel like satisfied. My hunger is sated.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. When I was a kid, when I was around 12, it was right after my parents' divorce, and I went to Atlanta, and my father, biological father that is, was awesome in the sense that he was just recently divorced, so he was willing to let me do anything in order for me to gain his favor. So he would always take me to Sonic, and I would order anything completely unsupervised. And I think when I was 12, I ate a yard of chili cheese dog.
Oh my gosh.
I I didn't feel good,
I can imagine you didn't feel good.
but I did feel good in like a accomplishment sense.
It reminds me of, do you know the whole thing at In-N-Out where you can get 3x3, 4x4?
Yes.
So-
Yes. Speaking of my my brother-in-law Sharon, he showed me the Flying Dutchman and the 4x4 and all that.
Flying Dutchman, whatever. But if you didn't know this, there is no limit to the number. So you can get a 6x6, a 10x10, a 15x15, whatever you want to do. It 100% is true. And when I was in college, I remember talking to a dude that was saying that in his high school, he played football, and he was like, the initiation was that every person that joined the football team had to go to In-N-Out with the team and eat a 20x20.
Oh my God.
So the dude literally had to go to In-N-Out. He said it was like, it's not even a burger at that point. They lay it sideways in the little cardboard carton thingy, and you just have to eat it in pieces.
That sounds, I mean, it sounds fun when you're a high school football player, but that sounds like torture.
A death sentence for me.
When I went to college, me and one of my best friends, Caleb, went out there, and there was a burger joint right next to there called Stuffed. If you guys are in Fort Collins, Stuffed is a pretty good burger shop. And we saw a guy in the back of house making like some monstrosity, and it wasn't on the menu. And Caleb tapped the shoulder of the waitress and it's like, what did that guy order? And he's like, oh, no, that's just one of our cooks. We made that special. It's like his own thing that he gets at the end of the shift. And he's like, no, I want one. And she's like, it has like 8 patties on it. We're not going to make you that. And he's like, I want it.
I'll pay for
so
it.
they made this 8 patty burger, and him and I were such just like teenage, like testosterone hungry all the time that he ate this 8 patty burger. And the second we stepped out, we looked to the left and we saw a Japanese restaurant. We're like, man, I could really go for some sushi.
Oh my gosh. There was a point in time where in my high school days, I could go to In-N-Out and be like, I'll have 2 double doubles, animal style, fries, and drink, and take it all down, no problem.
Dude, I worked at Five Guys. I would get a large Five Guys fry, which you know how big that is. Yeah. And then I'd get...
They're getting smaller, though, which ticks me off.
Only a little bit. It depends on the place. The problem
Every time
with the
I go to
Five Guys fries, and I'll tell everybody
fries.
this, the problem with Five Guys is that they actually teach the fry cooks to make the fries, which means that they are in control of the portions. There's no like McDonald's sizing section. So the fries can either be very good if somebody actually cares about what they're doing, or very, very bad and the wrong size. It just depends.
That's fair.
But yeah, I'd get a large fry. I'd get a double all the way. Then I'd get a milkshake that was vanilla, chocolate, Oreo filling, whipped cream, and cherries and peanut butter, I want to say.
Oh my gosh, dude.
I was rail thin, and I would just hork that down. Calories went nowhere. I don't know what happened, but the second like 22 hit, that stopped being a thing for me.
Jeez.
And I haven't quite. In my head, I'm still a skinny person. I'm a tall person, so people see me as skinny, but I am.
If I was to put it in the sort of verbiage of our times, I identify as a skinny person.
I identify as a skinny man.
Even though I'm trapped in a fat man's body.
Yes, and I
That's
can't
not
get
fair.
out.
In a chubby man's body is what I'm trapped into.
You know what? The way that I would describe you, if someone was like, that man ran over there, what did he look like? I'd be like, it's a short, barrel-chested guy.
That's fair. I'll take that. I like a barrel chest. I'll take a barrel rather than a 6-pack, like the old joke goes.
Oh God.
That's probably a good spot for us to close this sucker down. Really appreciate all y'all listening and for the continued support, obviously. So just want to say thanks for that. I do hope you enjoyed this episode. You want to give us our little social media updates or whatever? Tell us what to do.
It seems like Daniel's been doubling down on some new content that we were building up. Check out our YouTube if you happen to be wanting to.
It's just streaming now on YouTube Music, basically. Now I've all connected it to where if you go to YouTube Music, we're actually a podcast that's just on YouTube Music and you can go listen.
Excellent.
There, so.
Okay. Yeah. So we are available on YouTube in case your Spotify membership runs out. We also have an Instagram, a TikTok.
And we need to get on Facebook too. Our Patreon is also up and running, everybody.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's bare bones right now. It is literally, if y'all are feeling generous and you want to support us, I have 2 tiers, $5 and $10. I don't want to abuse anybody here.
For now, it's just like, if you want to
We're
us a
doing this
coffee.
for free, to be honest with you, as of now. Actually, that's not true. We've made almost $4 in ads.
Dude,
so
we have
far.
to have a $4 party.
Right?
Yeah, I was telling Shalane, I was like, we got to go to the
cash it out
dollar
and
store.
frame one of the dollars, to be honest with you.
We should.
I want to do it.
We should. That would be so
makes
good.
Me, I know everybody out there is probably giggling and going like, man, you guys are whatever. But like, we're very passionate about this and very dedicated to this. And I didn't even know, but it was like a week or so ago, the platform that we host on, somebody wanted to advertise through our podcast. So we're have an actual person that's paying to get advertising done through us. Not a whole lot of money so far, but hey, I hope it's signs of things to come, and it made me proud.
So if you guys want to support us, check us out on Patreon. I mean, you have to think about how long these episodes are and how many, this is all scripted. So think about how many thousands of words Daniel has put into telling the story of, Tennessee whiskey. It really means a lot to have that support.
It does.
We're still going to do it whether you support us or not.
It's true.
We love what we're doing, but if you do want to, say, hey, Daniel, thanks for the long hours. Here's a coffee. That's a great way to do it.
That's a very good way to put it. It's funny you say that too. I did a little tabulation, and between the 3 series that I've completed so far, I'm at over 150 pages of writing, which is, for me, it's the most I've ever written on anything ever in my life.
Most that most people will ever,
it's
write
longer than a
personally.
doctorate thesis.
Yeah.
So for me, that was a pretty big source of pride, I'll be honest with you. And I'm not talking like double-spaced writing. I'm talking single-spaced 11-point font.
I know, because when I was starting to write my thing, I was like, how many pages do I need? And he's like, oh, you just need this many pages. And I was like, that's like 15 minutes of writing. He's like, oh, I do my 11-point font, single space. And I I was like, I thought we were going professional here, man.
That is professional. I write like novels.
I know. I had to double everything for this last episode.
Yeah, but it is a pretty good amount of work. So any support that y'all can give us to continue these endeavors would obviously be very much appreciated.
Also, shamelessly, I want to send a shout out to my company, Metalwork by Miola. If you guys are looking for some custom handmade knives, I have some available on the store. And if there's something that you're looking for in particular, just shoot me a message. I love making custom work. If you're interested in cooking, want to get into cooking, just are a collector of fine handmade goods, just shoot me a message.
And to add on to that, if anybody here has not used a carbon steel knife, you may not know this, but they are going to get much, 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 much sharper than the normal stainless steel knives.
Most of the time, yes.
Yeah, that you can get here, at least in America. So if anybody out there is continuously frustrated, like I have always been my whole life, at how my knives will never stay the sharpness level that I want them to stay, I actually have made several knives with Akiva under his extreme care and tutelage. I wouldn't have been able to complete them without him. But the knives they stay sharper for longer, and when they're freshly sharpened, holy moly, be careful, because it's like cutting through butter on thick vegetables like carrots. It's lovely. It's a lovely experience. So, and actually, along with that too, if you do decide to buy one of Akiva's knives, you can use the code biographers at checkout, and you'll get 10% off your order. Yeah, and 10% off is pretty solid considering the investment that it is to get a handmade chef knife. Absolutely. So. Cool. I guess we'll close it down there. Again, everybody go check out Metalwork by Miola for your chef's knives and custom knife making needs. Beyond that, though, we'll say thanks for listening. And like I usually like to close this down, I'll say, remember, ignorance is not stupidity. It is the absence of knowledge. And I hope you have all learned something today. See you next time. See ya. Bye. Bye.
You've been listening to The Biographers. For more information, please visit thebiographerspodcast.com.